Dan seterusnya, kelemahan ringgit, harga komoditi dan sentimen pasaran menyaksikan penubuhan Jawatankuasa Khas Ekonomi 3 minggu lalu. Susulan perbincangan dengan 10 anggota Jawatankuasa, kerajaan hadir dengan beberapa penyelesaian bagi membantu industri dan menyokong sektor kewangan. Dan yang paling ditunggu-tunggu pastinya bajet 2016 yang akan dibentangkan akhir bulan hadapan. Apa yang akan disusun kerajaan dalam berdepan ketidaktentuan ekonomi global dan beberapa faktor negatif lain. Dan untuk perbincangan lebih lanjut, kita bersama Dekan Sekolah Perniagaan Malaysia, University of Science and Technology, MUST, Dr Yeah Kim Leng. Dr Yeah, hi, thank you for joining us. I think first of all, let's talk about the announcement that was made by the Prime Minister, a proactive action towards addressing issues in the economy right now, especially the challenges in the global economy and also the domestic economy right now. These 4 proactive measures include, one of it is to stabilize the stock market and also to take care of the welfare of the people in the middle of the challenging global economy. What do you what's your view on the announcement that was made by the Prime Minister?
Okay, I think recently we have seen a markdown in terms of global growth. There has been increased uncertainties, and it's likely that this year, 2015, global growth will likely to be weaker than 2014. So I think as a result of these so-called headwinds facing the global economy, including the uncertainties over the slowdown, the extent of the slowdown in China, that has actually cast a big pall on Malaysia's sentiments. I think it's a consumer as well as investors' sentiments. So I think given the increased headwinds, I think it's timely that the government put together some kind of package of measures to show up confidence. I think importantly to reassure both the consuming public and then importantly the investors that Malaysia's fundamentals remain relatively still sound enough to withstand the current global headwinds, especially the slowdown in China. And then, of course, given the weak commodity prices, Malaysia has been impacted largely, and that also has a follow-through impact on the ringgit. The ringgit has also weakened substantially. So that has created, I think, overly negative confidence in the Malaysian public. So I think it's important. We see these measures as coming at a time where it can help to stabilize the concerns over the growth of the Malaysian economy, given that Malaysia, although the growth is moderating, both in the second half that we are expecting because of the implementation of GST as well as the weaker exports that we have seen in the first half, that to help actually stabilize the sentiments, and then Malaysia, I think the economic growth should still remain within the range that as we have projected at between 4 to 5% even for the second half. So overall for the year, we don't see any major shocks that will derail the economy from achieving at least a 4 to 5% growth. So we think that growth is likely to be at the higher end of the 4 to 5% band, and that itself should ensure that should be sufficient for Malaysians to continue the business as usual, normal life. You see, of course, bearing in mind the critical headwinds that we are facing and taking preemptive measures.
Okay, let's take a look at Budget 2016 when we come back, especially let's address the 2 biggest stakeholders in this Budget 2016, which is the consumer and also the businesses in Malaysia, and what can the government, how can the government address issues right now, the headwinds that you mentioned earlier, and maybe increase confidence in consumers and businesses moving forward 2016. Let's take a look at that shortly. Dan kita akan berehat seketika, kembali selepas ini lebih banyak perbincangan. Dan bertemu kembali dalam Bisnes Awal ini. Earlier, you mentioned that there are headwinds in the global economy right now. And this has also led to the strengthening of dollar versus ringgit and also other uncertainties in the market right now. And when people hear, or when consumers hear about all these uncertainties in the market, they become a bit cautious to spend. Moving forward, I think, and I personally think that they will become a bit cautious to spend 2015, 2016. If when the government rolls out, or when the government tabled the budget on the 23rd of October 2015 for budget 2016, what can the government maybe announce to increase confidence in consumers so that they will continue to spend, looking at how big domestic consumption is contributing to the Malaysia's economy?
Okay, private consumption actually contributes slightly more than half of the GDP. So I think it's important to sustain a growth that we project will easily come between 6.6 to 6.5% per annum. And that itself will contribute 3 percentage points to GDP growth, you see. So in terms of consumer sentiments, what we see here is that the job market is still relatively strong, in the sense that our unemployment rate is still hovering around 3 to 3.1%. And we have seen modest wage growth. That itself also will provide the kind of support for spending. Of course, the household debt level is relatively high, given that it's currently standing around 87% of GDP. But that would not derail other income groups, especially those high income brackets, those in higher income brackets, from spending. You see? But what's important here is that we note that bank lending is still continuing. They are still increasing at a rate of 8 to 9% per annum. And with that kind of credit growth, it suggests that access to financing will still continue to support both the consumer spending as well as business investments. So overall, the concern over a sharper than expected so-called slowdown in the consumption, I think is not warranted, given that we have gone through the initial difficulties and uncertainties over the implementation of GST. I think the public is getting used to coping with the increase in the GST. Fortunately, there has not been very much serious implementation difficulties over GST.
And also a good news would be the lower energy or oil prices in the market right now.
That has helped to offset the so-called anticipated increase of inflation or cost of living due to the GST, you see. But what's important here also, we note that consumers, especially those in new households, they still continue to spend, because the working age population is still increasing at higher than the normal population growth, because this group is actually the one that is also holding up our spending. And then importantly, our commodity prices hasn't collapsed yet. It's still hovering at more than 2,000 over ringgit per ton, and that itself is above the so-called level that will suggest that the rural, even the small households, still have enough sufficient income to continue the spending.
So briefly, before we take another short break, what do you suggest the government announce in Budget 2016 for consumer to maybe help sustain this growth of or this continuous spending and consumption by the consumer, or by private consumption in 2016? Briefly.
I think importantly we see here the confidence is sustained by the fact that outlook remains positive and we are not going through a hard landing, you see, some kind of major slowdown, you see, which will result in people cutting down on the spending. So I think importantly the kind of measures that are undertaken has to boost confidence, in the sense that first, the overall macroeconomic management remains sound. Overall structure, overall the underlying fundamentals still remain positive to sustain both investor confidence as well as consumer sentiments.
This includes social net as well.
Yeah, the social safety net. And of course, the BRIM is going to be implemented in September this month. So I think that also would result in an increase in spending by consumers. So all this, importantly, I think what we see here is that consumers, for those that require those so-called budget, those called big ticket items, they will continue to spend, largely because given the age of the population, we are still relatively young. They will still continue to spend. Those first-time house owners will still continue to shop for houses. It's just that we just need to rebalance some of the so-called the gaps in terms of supply and demand towards the more affordable housing. And then importantly, to ensure that job creation still remains relatively strong, and by attracting investment, by creating a very conducive environment for businesses to continue to invest and continue to hire despite all these headwinds.
Okay, let's take another short break. When we come back, we'll talk about business confidence moving forward. We are waiting for the announcement by the Fed, and that has affected business in terms of the weakening weakening ringgit versus dollar for quite a while. So I think today's announcement, or later today's announcement, will be quite a relief to businesses. But what can we do to help business confidence moving forward? Let's talk about that shortly. Kita akan berehat sekali kembali selepas ini. Dan bertemu kembali, kita bersama dengan Dr Ya Kim Leng daripada MUST membincangkan berkenaan dengan bajet 2016. So, what can the government announce in budget 2016 to increase business confidence moving forward?
Okay, 2016 budget will be unique in the sense that it will represent the first year of our 11 Malaysia plan. And of course, that's the last mile before we hit our 2020 target to be a high-income nation. So I think there's a need to sustain business confidence. So importantly, we are seeing continuing investments in the big projects to sustain investment confidence and building up the infrastructure. Those will still continue to be the main driver of investments and modernizing our infrastructure and facility to the extent that it will bring in more investors, both local as well as foreign. So I think that's one very important aspect that we see, sustained investments in modern infrastructure, and not just in physical roads, but also I think importantly in ICT, in expanding our broadband so that we can capitalize greater investments in the ICT sector.
And the government also, in the recent announcement, the Prime Minister also announced that there will be increased investment in the domestic key sectors. Will this be a trend moving forward? GLCs or institutions in this country investing in the local and domestic key businesses?
So far, what has been encouraging is that the investment approvals received for manufacturing and services in the first half of this year has already exceeded more than 60-70% of last year's approvals. So that suggests that the investment trend is still continuing to rise, and we expect private investment, even there is a slowdown, to hover easily at the high teens, you see, easily 8 to 10% growth for this year. And if we can sustain the growth over the next few years at this rate, Malaysia's private investment would become a stronger engine of growth, and as well as expanding the industrial upgrading and the expansion of our industrial capacity. So I think that's important to sustain it. And then importantly, we have to convince that Malaysia is still a very attractive, is the most attractive place to do business, especially when we have created the ASEAN Economic Community, so that Malaysia can become the regional hub for both production as well as the distribution hub for the region. So we have to look not just inward, but also outwards into the region. And we are seeing a lot of sectors, a lot of companies in different sectors taking that kind of view, a regional view, and going forward towards the more internationalized outlook for their business strategies. So I think Malaysia would need to push further in this global front.
A yes, no question. The outlook is positive, yes or no?
I think if we work hard enough, we can make it more positive.
Okay, thank you very much Dr. Ya Kim Leng daripada MUST membincangkan berkenaan dengan bajet 2016 dan juga unjuran bergerak ke hadapan memasuki tahun 2016. Dan sepanjang minggu ini sehingga 23 Oktober, Astro Awani akan meninjau pandangan perniagaan dan pengguna. Ini adalah sebahagian daripada liputan kami untuk bajet 2016 di media sosial kami. Astro Awani turut membuat tinjauan berkenaan situasi ekonomi semasa dan harapan anda untuk bajet 2016. Jadi hantarkan pandangan anda ke media sosial kami dengan hashtag bajet 2016 dan laporan serta temu bual itu tadi mengakhiri bisnes Awani. Ikuti laporan berita tempatan dan juga antarabangsa di laman web astroawani.com. Anda juga boleh mahu turun aplikasi Astro Awani di Google Play Store dan juga App Store. Hantarkan juga pandangan anda ke media sosial kami dan teruskan bersama kami di Astro Awani. Saya Rizal Zulkafli. Salam hormat.